Right. So, Dawn, thank you so much for inviting me today to talk a bit about some of the work I do around OD, specifically looking at how we have difficult conversations. It's an area that we don't talk about very often, but it really costs us a lot in our relationships, which is why I'm really passionate about this topic. And I'm really pleased to be here today to share some of the insights and the work that I've done around just mastering some core skills around having difficult conversations. So it shouldn't take too long, but it's going to be engaging. So I hope you're all ready to participate and get involved, because I'll be asking you some questions, my dear ladies, Eve and Victoria, and Dawn as well, so that, you know, you get a feel for how you can also, you know, take on a difficult conversation if you're ever faced with one. So let's just begin by defining what I mean by a difficult conversation. Basically, it talks about the fact that when you're confronted with a conversation with someone, you tend to find yourself faced with maybe some really strong emotions. You start to feel physical signs such as stress, anxiety, maybe feeling sweating, or, you know, that kind of, see that red sign come up, you know, the alert that something is not quite right in this conversation. It might be that you're, the person you're speaking to has an opposing opinion to you. And that is not kind of helping you to progress the conversation in the direction that you would want it to go. Or there may be some high stakes. There's a reason why you're having this conversation, because there's something that really means, has importance to both parties, yourself and the other person. So these are the kind of things that give you signs that you're actually in a difficult conversation. Aside from the physical signs, you might have some emotional signs. You might be also experiencing some anger, some fear, you know, that kind of fight or flight feeling where, you know, this doesn't feel right to me. I'm just not getting anywhere with this conversation. Or you might see some behavioral signs, you know, some unhealthy kind of emotions or behaviors coming through, like the person gets up and walks out, or the person becomes quiet, doesn't say much, or that what's really been said is kind of causing the other person to raise their voice. Those are the kind of things that you'll tend to see when the conversation starts to get difficult. I'm kind of going to skip over that, but just to give you a flavor, or to kind of break into this conversation in more detail, I just wanted to run a quick exercise. Okay, so ladies, I want you to participate in this. And it's really just to, sorry, that's a picture of my nephew, by the way, sitting in the seat. But I just want you to quickly think back to when you're a child. How do you get your own way? What does a child tend to do when they want their own way? What would they tend to do? Just off the top of your head. Dawn, Eve, Victoria, what comes to mind?
Well, I think that you would ask if you want something, and then if you don't get it, you could cry.
Okay.
Or you could get it, or yes, you could have a tantrum, start stamping the feet.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
I think if it's a child, they also might just go and help themselves to whatever they wanted.
As long as it's within reach, yeah.
Of course, yeah, go and help yourself, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You just get on with it.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. It's like, you know, whatever mum and dad have to say, I'm not listening. I'm just going to go and get it myself.
Right.
But whatever the case, there's some behaviors that you will tend to see when a child is trying to get what they want. And if they don't get it, they're going to react one way or the other. And the principle of this work really focuses on an assumption, which is that as human beings, we have a strong tendency to either go silent when we don't get what we want, or we move to violence. And this is where the basis of the crucial conversation starts, which is that we're trying to develop some skills in order to break that pattern, okay? Where naturally, like you said, Dawn, the child would normally go to either not saying anything, crying, being upset, or they'll throw a temper tantrum and be kicking and screaming. So we're using, for the sake of argument in this work that we do, we use the terms silence and violence, but it's a spectrum of behaviors that you'll see people use naturally in order to get what they want. And we tend to apply that even as adults. And if you think about it as adults, if you're in a crucial conversation with somebody and they're not getting what they want, or you don't get what you want, you either go quiet and don't say anything anymore because it ain't worth it, the person ain't listening anyway, or you might also get angry yourself and respond in a very aggressive manner. So through this work, we actually kind of become aware of that tendency and look at how we can actually break that cycle and enable you to realize what's actually going on in the conversation and move it to a position where you actually get what you want out of the conversation. Okay, so we haven't got much time, but what I'm quickly going to do is give us a chance to do a quick exercise where we start to think about the kind of person that we find most difficult. Okay, it's a quick exercise, it shouldn't take long, but it's not a specific person, but if you think of a difficult person, what kind of person comes to mind? You know, they refuse to take ownership, someone who's completely stubborn, you know, those kind of stubborn types, those that don't listen to you, or those that clean up. What kind of person that do you particularly find difficult? And I am building up to something, so please stick with me on this one. Yeah. Any thoughts?
Yeah, people who put it politely, people who misrepresent the truth. Yeah.
Absolutely.
People who lie, in other words.
Well, you know, that's in common money. That's what you call it. Yeah. Got it up a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you find that those types of people particularly difficult?
If you're going to have an honest conversation where you're going to reach a goal or common understanding, then it's hard to get there with people who they're either a stranger to the truth or they enjoy lying. I don't know, probably a bit of both. Yeah, but it's hard to get to a goal or a healthy goal with someone like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dawn, any thoughts from your end? What types of
people who are overly negative and critical, you know, anything that, you know, comes up, they've always got to pull it down. They've always got to see the bad side. The glass is always empty for them, not even half empty, but empty. You know, the kind of people that will make it shower with rain on a sunny day because this is their disposition. You know, those kind of people, I find it difficult to be around because life isn't like that. It shouldn't be like that. You know, we can choose to be happy and we can choose to be miserable.
Yeah, exactly. It's a choice.
Yeah.
Those they just become annoying, and you don't even want to be around those types of people at all. Negative people just irritant. Absolutely. Victoria, I noticed that you've come off speaker, so would you like to contribute as well? What's your version of a difficult person?
Yeah, I was putting things in chat for the other one, but I wasn't sure how you wanted it. So I would say somebody who comes across a narcissistic. So narcissistic, and also agreeing with what the others have said as well, pathological liar. So somebody who's a narcissist and pathological liar. They may not believe that they're a narcissist, but the behavior is very much so.
Absolutely. But I just want you to hold that thought for a moment, okay? And then think about, okay, part 2 of this exercise. I want you to create or to come up with a name for this person, the pathological liar, the narcissist, or that annoying negative person. I've got annoying Afua or talkative Ted. What other kind of names would you come up with for this person?
Lying Larry.
Lying Larry. Okay. Yeah. So hold that person's name in your mind for a moment. Dawn, what about your character?
So it's got to be a male name then.
Any male, female, it doesn't matter. Just that annoying person. Give them a name.
Negative Nelly.
Okay, Negative Nelly. And Victoria?
Oh, I don't know. I can't think on the hoof like that.
Okay, no problem. But you can see that, we start to create, with the person that we've got in mind, we start to visualize, we start to create an impression or a name for that person. And I want you to go on to part 3 of this exercise, which is to describe the types of things that this person does that made you choose that name. How would they make you feel? How would you describe them? How might you react on your worst day towards that person? How would they make you feel?
This is interesting because I've just done 4 characters in my book, and one of the characters is the person which you're talking about what I'm talking about, which is to do with narcissistic pathological liar. And I've called him Donald, but my friend said I should call it a black name, but I said you have black people called Donald as well as Donald. So and the reason I choose that is which goes back to your exercise here, is because they create alternative facts, they cause chaos and upheaval and conflict wherever they are. So there's the points I wrote down. Absolutely. Which I'm doing as a character.
Wow.
So and I see them as a disruptor.
And we all know those types of people. Yeah. You know those characters in our lives. They're somewhere, somehow, they show up. Yep. But how do they make you feel? I mean, I know yours is a character, Victoria, but I mean, you've kind of given it a name, but what feelings come up as you're describing the behaviors?
Well, unfortunately, Afua, my feelings are very disassociated due to very past experiences. So I don't really have that many feelings to connect with them. So that's why I've just called it a disruptor, and then the other words linked to it.
Right, that's fine. Dawn, any thoughts your end?
Well, maybe that's what we do when we are coming across people that we don't identify with or that make us uncomfortable. We do disassociate ourselves from them. We stay away from them. We might not, they send us a message, we might not respond, or they make a call, we might be otherwise engaged, or they invite us, somewhere and our diary is full. That's usually what happens, isn't it? When there are people that you don't want to
avoid the person.
Yeah,
I'm going to look out for that now, Dawn. So if any of those things happen, I will know.
Never with you, Victoria. Never.
Her diary is going to be full. Okay.
Well, that's the thing. When you're trying to make appointments with people, and that person says to you, "Oh, I can see you in 2 months' time on a particular day," that's when you realize the person doesn't really want to see you. Because don't tell me that for 60 days, you cannot spend 10 minutes to talk to somebody, in 60 days. The person doesn't want to see you, simple as that. And that has happened,
But the point I'm trying to make here is that we actually start to react towards that person in a certain way as a result of the thoughts and the feelings. And we know that it's been done to us, but we also do it to others as well, okay? Instead of staying in that healthy conversation, okay? So I'm just going to move through to this next slide, because this slide is actually quite an important one, okay? What's the cause of these emotions that we have towards people that we find difficult? Well, I guess as humans, we kind of always try and move to a point where we feel safe, okay? Because we don't either, or we move, as I said, to silence, or we move to violence, because we're just uncomfortable about having those difficult conversations. Okay, so we might kind of like, if you remember in the beginning of the exercise, I asked you to, you know, think of a difficult person. You started to begin to see and visualize that person. Okay, then you told a story about that person. Okay, they generate some feelings, and then it moves you to act in a certain way towards that person. Okay, but with a crucial conversation, what you should be doing is trying to get to a point where you remain in healthy dialogue with that person. Okay, so rather than withdrawing, avoiding, and masking what's really going on in the conversation, you actually, where you move to silence, you actually continue to build a safe environment where you can extract a common area of understanding, where you begin to get a shared pool of meaning, an aspect where both of you actually understand what you're talking about, so you can get what you actually want from the conversation. So rather than moving either to silence or violence, you move into the middle area, which is the pool of shared meaning. Okay, I think it's really to avoid us generating a story that might stop you from staying in that healthy dialogue conversation. What we tend to do is, rather than get what we want, okay, because we've created a story about what's really going on, we end up acting in a way that we don't get what we want. But through this work, it enables you to get what you want and remain in a healthy relationship, in a healthy dialogue with that individual until you get what you want. So let me just skip through this. The aim really is that we want to move out of negative emotions and build an unhealthy emotions, and build positive emotions and positive relationships. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of break it down around how you go about creating a different story whilst you're in the conversation. Okay, once you're clear that there's a story going on, you start to actually master that story. So like I showed you the path to action before, where you act, you hear, you see, and then you move to action. You try and break that cycle or that path by actually separating out the facts from the story. Okay, what's really going on in this conversation here? What are the facts that support this conversation we're having? You also watch out for the 3 clever stories, and I'll go into a bit more detail about what that really is. And then you continue the conversation by telling the rest of the story. Now, let me just kind of summarize what I'm trying to describe here. And I'll use a story that, a recent situation that I was in myself. I have a very good friend who, you know, I've been friends with her for a good, say, 7 years now. We recently decided to form a little mastermind group of women. And we had a conversation where we both agreed that this is what we wanted. Now, we had our first meeting. There were, you know, four women that showed up for the first meeting. But at the end of it, there was one woman in the group that I had brought along, and my friend said to me that she didn't quite like her style. I immediately took offense to what she said and started to argue with her, you know, and we got into this massive argument about, you know, why would you say that about my friend? You know, I brought her along in the same way you brought your friend along, and, you know, you're now criticizing her. I wasn't impressed. So we ended up in a massive argument, which resulted in me not actually speaking to her. You know, we both ended the conversation. I went off my way and she went off her way. And then I thought to myself, listen, hold on, Afua, you're actually in a crucial conversation here. You've just done what you're trying to, you know, help people to get through. You've just done the same thing, you know, which is move to violence. I actually got really angry. I got so mad with her. you know, slam the phone down and all that stuff. So I called her up and we started the conversation again. But what also appeared, what I realized was that we actually wanted the same thing, which was to form this mastermind group. So why did we end up in a situation where we were kind of talking about other things? She said, he said, you said, I said, she said. It made no difference to us getting what we wanted. We actually got detracted from what we wanted and ended up in another conversation, which was about everything else. I'm sure all of you can identify with a scenario like that, because we do it all the time, where we actually miss what we actually want and end up talking about something that's completely irrelevant. So we went back to the conversation and separated the facts. Where did we start this conversation? We started with, we want to start a mastermind group, okay? And we want it to be a group with 4 women, like-minded, and we want to, you know, create some parameters around it. So as you see, we started to really kind of break down the fact from the story. Get rid of the story. That really wasn't helping us. Let's stick to the facts and get to the heart of what we actually want. What I also realized was, and let me move into the next slide, which is where we have the 3 clever stories, okay? I moved into victim mode, which is that she just doesn't understand me. She doesn't get what I'm trying to do. It's all her fault. She just doesn't, she's just dissed my friend and I'm not pleased with her. When I spoke to her, you know, she was blaming me. She said it was all my fault. You know, I was the villain, you know, and in other types of conversations, you might find that there's the helpless story where you might find that the individual says, well, you know, there's nothing else I can do. I mean, I'm sure we've also seen that kind of character coming up when you're having a dialogue where that becomes really critical or crucial, that the other person just says, look, there's nothing I can do about this, you know, and both of you bail out of the conversation. So when you're in a crucial conversation, it's important to look out for the victim, the villain, or the helpless stories in the conversation. Once you're aware that that's what's going on, you can move the conversation back into the safe space and start to create the healthy dialogue once again. Okay. And the third part of this process is where you actually start to tell the rest of the story. So you go back to the slide that I shared earlier, if you don't mind. I think if I just help you to kind of go back to that point, which is your path to action. Okay, and through this path to action, you actually recreate it so that the action that comes out at the end of it is what you really want. Okay, so you tell the story, you break away from the strong emotions, and then you start to recreate the story so that it comes back to the point that you both agreed with, or that you both want from the discussion, or that what you even want from the discussion, so that you get what you want and the conversation remains healthy. Dawn, you're scratching your head. Is there anything that's coming up for you at this moment that you want to share?
The slide before this I thought was really interesting, because you're really saying that in any crucial conversation, there's someone who's going to say they are the victim, someone who's going to be the villain, and there's someone who's going to have some helpless stories. But I just think these are real life. There are times when, you know, you do feel like the victim. And so you're having a moment about what the situation is. And you're also talking about who the villain is. The villain might be the person you're speaking to, or it might be that you're talking about somebody else who's a villain. And then you do have helpless stories when that person is going through something and they feel they can't see a way out. They can't see a solution. And I think to break down conversation into these 3 stories, it's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I just want to take you back to what we're trying to do here. Now, in enlightening ourselves about what a crucial conversation looks like, okay, it then empowers you to actually start to think of your difficult conversation from a different perspective. So you're not going along with the person that you're in the difficult conversation with, so that both of you end up without getting what either of you want. Because you become enlightened about the fact that you're now in a difficult, crucial conversation, you can actually distinguish, okay, what is going on in the conversation. And more than likely, you'll start to see in the conversation that the person is either playing the victim, playing the villain, or is running a helpless story. You'll tend to see that happening in the conversation.
But is that a bad thing, though, if you're running a helpless story?
It's not a bad thing. Absolutely not at all. It's not a bad thing. But you see, it's raising your awareness that this is what's going on. So it helps you to stay in the conversation and not get drawn into silence or violence. You stay in the middle, which is healthy dialogue. Does that make sense? Because ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. Stay in the conversation so that you end up getting what you want at the end of the conversation. I'm not saying that it's easy, and learning these skills doesn't come with a 1 hour conversation. This training actually happens over 3 days. So there's so many actual elements to it. But I'm just giving you some very, very high level tips around what to look for when you're having a crucial conversation.
So
Okay.
can I just make a comment, Afua, on what you're saying about this, that as I see it, then these crucial conversations, the dynamics of them are different and changeable depending on the scenario and who you're engaging with. So the two most difficult ones are work conversations, particularly where the dynamic might be between you and someone, not necessarily a peer. It could be a peer where there's a conflict, or it could be a conflict where the other person is your manager or a senior person to you, and that's in a situation. But also family conversations, relationship conversations with people you care about can be harder than work ones that take on this, crucial conversation situation. Because I think, if I'm picking up what you're saying, I mean, the whole thing about crucial conversation is you want to get somewhere with it. You don't want to chop it off. It's important you get somewhere with it for a purpose. So either to improve the relationship, whatever it is, to get something out of someone in terms of maybe a piece of work or working together or something. And then from the friendship or the family dynamic, you want to have a certain amount of cordiality within that one, because obviously that's important, because your feelings tend to be more engaged. And I do find that one to be one of the hardest sometimes. It's easier to cut off from a conversation with someone who might be a friend or family than it is at work, because you're forced to be around that person. You're forced to engage with them, even though, you might be going around in circles trying to get this crucial conversation happening and maintain the right position to get somewhere in terms of what needs to be done.
No, absolutely. Now, the thing is, these are kind of fundamental frameworks that we're using here to get us to really understand. I mean, I think you've given a really great example, because you've now understood that what a crucial conversation looks like. Okay, so now you know that when you're going into a conversation that is going to be a tough one, you can actually adopt some skills that will enable you to get to that healthy point in the conversation, not just opt to either go quiet and say nothing, so that the relationship deteriorates or doesn't get resolved, or to move to the other end of the spectrum, which is where both of you get angry and nothing really gets resolved. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the silence and violence spectrum that I presented is actually, it's a continuum. Okay, but what we try to do is move to the middle, where you have the healthy dialogue. Okay, and as long as we stay in healthy dialogue, we have a chance of the relationship being coming out with, or having an outcome where you get what you want out of the conversation. You don't opt out, which is our preferred option, in fact, as humans. Rather than face the tough conversation, we'd rather not say anything, or we'll just blow up. It's the fight and flight syndrome. We all know fight and flight, right? It's like when you're faced with a fearful scary, situation, you either stand there and face it, or you opt out. You fight or flight. It's the same principle that I'm trying to describe here within a tough conversation.
Can I come in
Victoria,
here? Yeah, can I come
absolutely.
here? Yeah.
Please do.
I think it is interesting. I mean, I wonder whether this does allow for people which already do this naturally. And I say this because it depends. I think Eve and both Dawn have said something similar, which is, one is that it all depends on context. It all depends on context, and those three areas, or the three areas, the see and hear, tell story, feel it and act. It may not have been in the sequence that you've developed for the training, but it may be something which people have already done already. So that's the first thing around that. But the other thing which I wanted to say as well is that taking on with context, there's also perhaps another an element as well. It's whether you can be you can be bothered, you can be asked, basically, because sometimes you may be in a situation where you've done all of what you've just said, and you've done that because it's naturally what you do anyway. And I think all three of us sitting here, the levels we're at, more likely have done all of this. And the last step would be that whether you actually value the situation in the first place, and you get to the stage and you say, well, you know what, I can't be asked anyway, and it's the conversation isn't or the person isn't really required, so is the person's surplus, so I don't really need to do much more, and you've done it. But the last point, which I thought was I think was of interest as well, is the allowing. It's also I would say also to do with IQ as well. Not IQ meaning IQ that you've got the highest IQ, but kind of the emotional entanglement. Because if you're not engaged, I would argue that if you're not engaged with that, then it's something which perhaps people do see that this is something they need to be able to do. Whereas I think if you're already in that space, you're already doing that, and you know where to land yourself within a dialogue. You know where to land yourself within that. And this is a question to you, Afua. People which perhaps, not wanting to reveal anything, but people which perhaps may have experienced elements of different trauma in their lives, let's use those words, may have had to do this kind of, as part of their survival, have had to do this type of work without training to be able to survive, if that makes sense. And so they naturally land in the fact of the dialogue is what gets them out of the situation. So yes, you've put the spectrum of silence on one end and violence on the other, but they know how to survive. They need to have the middle bit, which is a dialogue. So they've learned those skills because of whatever has gone on in their life, that they've actually been able to do that, and they're very successful at doing that. And I just wonder whether that's something which comes out of some of the work you've done.
Yeah, and this work has been based on some solid research. I mean, I kind of really melted this right down to a very small section, but crucial conversations is actually it's widely used in corporates, in the work situation, as a tool to help conflict in workplace. But I actually did this work in the last company I did. We had over 700 people go through this training, and the feedback we received was absolutely, amazing, in that it wasn't just about work. We went in to try and help people to speak up in the workplace. We realized that people were working in environments where they actually felt fearful to speak up. Okay, their actions were that things were being, things that needed to come to the surface were being capped because people didn't feel able to speak up. And so we put them through this 1 week training, and as a result of that, they were taking a lot of the learnings into the home and applying it so that they could have more effective conversations with their wives, with their husbands, with their children, their teenagers, you know, who they were constantly having struggles having these conversations. Now, the price that we pay in not having these crucial conversations is, we all know, it affects our relationships in the long run. And if we don't deal with the conversation or the challenges that we're faced with as we're in the relationship, it tends to escalate and eventually erupts. And, you know, you end up seeing, as I said, or people just end up not saying anything, not speaking, not talking, or, as we all know, there are situations where you have abuse in the household, violent situations happening, or even just people using other forms of narcissistic behaviors in order to control or manage the situation. I'm not actually talking about it from the perspective of unhealthy people dealing with this. I'm talking about normal, rational people that are in a conversation that appears to be crucial, and looking at some core skills that they can use to enable them to remain in that dialogue.
I think that's
Okay.
I think even that's an interesting comment, Afua, and I promise I won't say anything after that.
I just wanted to finish my
Sorry,
sentence
yes.
here, because what I'm trying to actually say is that this framework in particular, as human beings, we do it to the point where it's so fast we don't even realize that we're doing it. We see here, tell a story in our mind, we have a feeling, and then we act. It's part of our makeup as human beings. It may happen in different forms or different, it may not be as chronological as this, but in one way or form, we have those experiences. We feel something and then we act out our feelings. And if we don't deal with that feeling that we're having or the story that we're telling in our minds, we will continue to act in a way that doesn't get us what we want. And that leads to a lot of the frustration, a lot of the anger, a lot of the upset that we see in our household, in our workplace, in our families, etc. So it's just really, once we bring the awareness, we develop the skills, it enables us to actually break the cycle and move into a much healthier set of emotions that gets us the results that we want. Yeah. And I hear about the context, absolutely, but I'm not talking about it from the context. I'm looking at it from the skill set, just like we would with developing other skills that we need. Enables us to actually handle, situations or a context much better than we would ordinarily not having that skill. And that's the premise that I'm coming from when I'm talking about this particular piece of work. Yeah, so sorry to interrupt you there, Victoria.
No, it's fine. I talk too much, so.
No,
okay.
Not at all. Please, this is a dialogue. We're in conversation here, so yeah, your contribution is much appreciated.
I suppose I write about and I do difficult conversations or difficult dialogue, and I use it from the premise of discrimination. So all the time I'm thinking about race, I'm thinking about sexism, racism, issues around LGBTQ plus or disability, whichever one, or an intersectional aspect. And I'm just thinking, there are many times if we use the workplace as an example, or even even in society when you're in the shop, when you find yourself in all of those aspects of what you see and hear and tell a story and how you feel and act. And yeah, I could talk a lot about that, but I just yeah, I don't know what to say really.
We see it every day. I mean, all of the stuff we've seen. Dawn, you haven't said anything, which is quite interesting. What's going on for you? Because all of the stuff we've seen over, the recent months, we see a lot of actions coming out, anger, upset, and all of that comes from some of the stories that we're hearing, we're feeling, we're seeing. It makes us feel a certain way, and so we have to act on what we're seeing and feeling, and it's positive emotions or it's negative emotions. But either way, unless we stay in the dialogue and we don't actually get to understand where the other person's coming from, we're not solving our problem. We're not solving the problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the takeaway from this is that we've got to see and hear where the other person is coming from. And I'm impressed that you had this training session with the company and people felt that they were able to use the skills that were taught at home. I think that's amazing, because although you were coming in from a work perspective so that people can get on better with each other in the workplace, sometimes what happens in the workplace is a reflection of what has happened at home. You know, so if they can go home and mend situations at home, then that usually spills over into more positive environment at work. So I think that's great. But there's another thing that you mentioned where you said that these methods are good for rational people. And I wondered if you have a section of this course which is for irrational people, people who are perhaps suffering with depression or mental health, and a conversation is not enough. What do you say then, Afua?
Well, I'm not trained in that area at all, okay? You know, the work that this covers is really for people that do rationalize. And the model is quite simplistic. And I'm not saying that it cannot be applied in that situation. I just haven't experienced it. Now, in the workplace, we're assuming that everybody comes to work and they're rational and they're reasonable and so on. But again, and that's not the case.
Victoria's
right?
shaking her head. She knows that's not so.
We know
that's not so.
In the workplace, lots of well-being issues in the workplace. But
wouldn't you say that's about 10 or 20% of the people who turn up to work?
If not more, since the pandemic, if not more, actually. Yeah.
If not more. Well-being is a major issue now in the workplace. Yeah. But all I'm saying is that, again, if you're in a crucial conversation, you've got a performance issue with a colleague at work, you need some skills in order to have that crucial conversation, then this tool or these skills can enable you to at least remain in dialogue. So you don't move into silence or violence as a result of the conversation being a tough one, you know. So it just empowers you. Not everybody has been through this training, but as long as you go through the training, it gives you a set of skills where you can actually be in control of the conversation. So you know that, you know what, in this conversation, my outcome is to have a performance conversation. I can see what's going on here. I'm going to help, with the skills that I have, I'm going to help us navigate our way through this crucial conversation so we have an outcome that meets the needs of myself and you as well. Okay, so meets the needs of the conversation that we're having. So as simplistic as it may sound, okay, it's really a set of skills that one can develop in order to ensure that you remain in that conversation and you yourself don't move to either end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you said the missing word, which I was trying to work out in my head. This is more of a kind of like an appraisal performance type conversation, which these skills are helping you with. It's not helping you with somebody in the street who decides to call you the N-word, which I only got a few weeks back, and then throws an egg at you. So I mean,
hold on, sorry. The thing is, Victoria, the same applies. That person has a feeling and they're acting in a certain way, which is why they're calling you that word, right? I'm not saying go and have a healthy conversation with that person, because clearly they've got if you decide to go and have a crucial conversation with them, okay, that means that you're really, you know, the definition, have they got an opinion that you're opposing? Is it really, they've got a strong emotion that you really, you know, I would run away in that situation. Some people might decide to confront them and face them with the equal amount of violence that person is showing you, because it's verbal violence, right? You might choose to. There are people that stand there and give the same back. Exactly. But what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, okay, with a set of skills, you can see that the person is in a, they're having their own issues. There's stuff going on for them, which is leading them to act in a certain way, right? They're telling a story about you, which is not true. You and I know that, okay? They've got some feelings that are coming up as a result, and they're acting in a certain way. Okay, so and so the action that they're taking is a violent action, okay? It's unhealthy emotions that that person is carrying. It's not healthy. Okay, is it your job to try and make them healthy at that point? I mean, I don't know whether I would care enough about that person to try and get into a dialogue with them, or even make it a crucial conversation.
Can I just make a comment, Afua?
Yes,
Now
please.
that as you're talking, I'm not talking as much today as I probably normally do, but I'm actually examining myself. And I find that now I'm in my mid-50s. I'm thinking about retiring at some time, not in the long distance, but in a short distance, really. I would like to retire. So I'm examining myself and things that you're saying, and the more frequent use of silence rather than my youthful, violence in terms of going and having like a little punch up in a kind of way of verbally, and winning an argument. I mean, I could really put argument with probably anybody, and I loved that when I was younger. But I find that in my personal life and also in my work life, I go into that silence thing where the person who's affronted me by their behaviors, lies or whatever, or we work in a situation in a work context, and also, being someone I'm a business, so therefore I'm going to be, I'm going to act in a cordial way and so forth. But what I'm thinking in my mind, you can't control that. I find that I'm tendency more to get into that side. I really do use that silence thing. I use it a lot, and I also use it in terms of my personal behaviour. So anyone that's on Facebook with me, like Dawn's on Facebook with me, well, no, I make a little thing about it. So yeah, just cut someone off, and I'm happy to cut off a few other people if they come on my page and say things that affront me. I'm just going to cut you off. Now, some people might think that cuts them off in real life. Well, I might not see them in real life all the time, but if I saw them, I'd hug them and chat. But it's being an affront to me on my page, and I'm at peace with it. But now you're saying what you're saying, I'm then starting to examine myself and say, Eve, are you doing the right thing? Surely maybe you should try and get back into the, getting in that situation to get to that, move towards a common ground. And you're making me feel uncomfortable after that. Definitely making me feel uncomfortable now because I thought I was protecting my mental health and well-being. And now I'm thinking, maybe I'm not. What would you say to that? What would you advise me in the context work or the other context around that? And that's a serious question.
Absolutely.
Thinking that.
Yeah, sorry. I think that is it me that's cracking up, or Eve? Because I'm hearing you, but you're going in and out.
Depends how you use the word. What do you mean cracking up?
I think you paused a little bit. Your broadband paused a little bit there after us. I didn't get what you were saying.
Okay, so it must be my connection.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
But you get the gist of what I was saying.
Yeah.
Now, I'm saying it in a truthful way because I think, I'm not a closed-minded person. I used to be more closed-minded when I was young. When you're young or whatever it is, you got, thoughts, whatever you want to say. But I'm open to what you're saying. But it's, as I said, it's making me examine myself and saying, well, Eve, are you doing the right thing to say you're going to go to silence? Not that you never interact with that person, but not going to be fully, because you're trying to protect your mental health and emotional well-being. That's what I tell myself. But now I feel like I'm fooling myself, and now I need to take a different tack. But what would you advise? What would you say, Afua?
Oh, that's such a good question. Eve, and when there's a price that we pay for either which way that we go.
Yeah.
If you stay silent, you're not getting what you want, really. You're just, you don't actually achieve what you want. I mean, let me ask you the question. The moments when you go silent, can you think of a specific example where you've gone quiet, just that you want to share with us quickly? I know that Victoria, you said you wanted to, it's now 8 o'clock, so.
Yeah, I think, well, I can give you an example, because there's actually many, now I'm looking at them, is that I recognize
that block button on Facebook.
I recognize, Afua, yeah, I recognize that I'm parking it, but I might park it forever. But I'm kind of parking that situation. And I've done it in a work context when I find that people are being disingenuous. And, I find that things they've done behind my back to put themselves in a better position than they are actually in. And I think to myself, I'm not even going to let them know that I know that. I'm just that. And they're naturally not going to get the best out of me, definitely, because I'm going to reserve things. So we're going to get into that crucial conversation and really thug it out. No, I'm going to put it somewhere and park it away. And I think my car park must be full and piling up. But as I said, as I'm moving on in years, I'm okay with that. Whereas before I think, no, you've got to go in there and say something and give that person an opportunity to explain themselves. Well, actually, most time people explain themselves make me feel worse. But I'm now, Afua, what you're saying, I'm now thinking that it's not the best in every situation I've been using it. So I need to maybe wind something back a little bit and have a little, I don't know, maybe a little criteria thing for myself as to whether I should use that or not. Because it's not wrong to go silent, but if you keep going silent or we keep going to violence, then we aren't going to get anywhere, are we?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
But this has really been food for thought. It definitely has been food for thought. So I need to, because I was going to do another. And I can actually, my example is, I had somebody else that I interact with, that I was planning, I think after today I'm going to go silent on that person. Then I'm going to go silent. I'm going to see what they're going to do. I'm going to see if they really are engaged in my situation, and if they're going to actually, now that they're not hearing from me the way that they do, what are they going to do? So that was my little plan. That's exactly what I was going to do. But now I'm going to rethink it, and maybe I won't do that. I'll do something else. I'll engage.
Have that conversation.
I might
Take the
ask
action.
some pithy questions instead.
Absolutely.
Really elicit their motivation. That's what I'm going to do.
Exactly.
How about that?
Exactly. There's a whole bit in this work that we do, which starts with me first. Okay. Half the time we don't really know what we want anyway. Do we really know what we want from that relationship? Do we really know what we want from that conversation? We're not quite sure. So even when the conversation becomes difficult, we're not really clear about what we actually wanted or want. So we end up going along with the stuff.
Exactly. I agree.
Rather than actually sticking to what we really want from the conversation.
Right.
So I think when, my call to action would be for each of us on this or listening to this, just think of one relationship where you've gone silent or you've gone violent, and think about what you actually wanted from that relationship or that conversation. What can you do differently so that you get what you want? Just one. That's all. One conversation, and see what you can do differently. At least try and create that shared pool of meaning. A conversation where both of you get an understanding of what you both want from the conversation. Define it and see how that conversation goes from there. I did this same exercise with another friend of mine recently. He hadn't spoken to his daughter for 5 years because him and his wife broke up, big hullabaloo. Wife told a whole story about him to his children. Children decided they weren't going to talk to dad anymore. So, he just gave up and said, they're not talking to me, don't really care, getting on with my life. And I did the same exercise with him, called into action. And a week later, he came back and he said, I've had my crucial conversation. and it went even more amazingly than I thought it could have. It brought tears to my heart, because I was just like, it's a framework that is very simple, but if you apply it, it can bring amazing results. You know, I'm still feeling emotional about it, because, you know, 5 years to not speak to your daughter is a long time. And because of a whole load of stories that have been told that weren't even necessarily, he hadn't had his chance to give his version of events to the story, meant that, you know, that relationship that he treasured, he was about to throw it out the window and just give up on it. You know, resigned to the fact that it would never be possible to have a relationship with his daughter again. You know, so my call to action would just be that. Try just one relationship that's not working and see. Just, I mean, we haven't done a lot around the framework, but just stay in the silence, the violence, stay in the middle, the dialogue part, and see how far you get with the conversation. And you'll see a remarkable change.
Wow,
that would be my call to action today.
And can you provide any paperwork? Can you provide any paper?
Yes,
I'd like to read
a
slide. The slides and a paper would be good for me, so I could read it.
I've got a book that I can.
Was it your book?
Share with you.
Is that your book?
I haven't written the book. No, it's not my book, but I can share the book that you know, with the research that's been done, all the basis for this research, and it gives you the whole, you know, a bit more meat around the whole framework. Absolutely, I'll share that with you. Yeah, it's called Crucial Conversations.
The reason I asked that is because an African American has been doing this for many, many years, and so I'd be very interested to see who's actually written the book, whether it's a white author or a black author, because I know that a black guy has been doing this for a long, long time. So I wondered whether that's built on the back of what he's done. So yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the work, you know, because the research is there, and as I said, a lot of the basis of it is around social behaviour and human behaviour. So, you know, the work has been done. It's been and it is used in corporations. The chap that came to deliver the workshop for us, he's a Nigerian man. He does it in a lot of large corporates globally. You know, that's what he does. And the transformation is the same wherever he goes. You know, you see a big shift in our people being able to now have that distinction, which enables them to go into difficult, tough conversations that we all try and avoid a lot of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to receiving the information.
No problem, I'll share that, absolutely.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for the opportunity, Dawn.
Thank you, Afua. I think it's really been amazing, you know. I think when we first heard the title Crucial Conversations, I was like, what is that? But I think I fully understand now, and I think it's really important that we all consider it in our own lives, because we all have one or two persons that we're either not speaking to or we have really bad memories of, that we feel that if we get in a room with them, we'd probably have a fight with. We all have people that we want to stay away from. And if we can have crucial conversations with those people, sometimes it opens up doors, you know, cold hearts suddenly warmer, stony hearts that suddenly melt. And life is too short, man, to carry these things with us to the grave. So I think it's a good thing that you're doing. It sounds like a really good course, and may you get many more people inquiring about it.